I lived 99 years to understand what I'm about to tell you. And if you're young enough to hear this with an open mind, you're already ahead of where I was at your age. Everyone thinks wisdom comes from being old. It doesn't. It comes from surviving your own stupidity long enough to recognize the pattern. I didn't get here by brilliance. I got here by stubbornly avoiding the things that ruin people. That's the secret no one likes to hear. People want the grand philosophy, the clever insight, the magic formula, but life doesn't work that way. You don't get smarter by chasing brilliance. You get wiser by eliminating folly. When I was your age, I thought the goal was to win fast. I wanted success, wealth, approval, the usual list. I mistook motion for progress and cleverness for understanding. It took decades to realize that wisdom is not additive, it's subtractive. You remove arrogance, impatience, envy, and greed one layer at a time until there's almost nothing left to corrupt your judgment. What remains is clarity, and clarity is worth more than any fortune. I wish someone had told me that when I was 20, because for most of my life I thought intelligence was the advantage. I was wrong. The real advantage is character, the ability to think rationally when emotion screams the opposite, the discipline to do the right thing when everyone else is doing the convenient thing. Most people never develop that muscle. They chase noise and call it knowledge. They confuse effort with progress. They mistake complexity for insight. I spent my first 40 years learning what not to do. The next 60 confirming that avoiding stupidity was a better strategy than chasing brilliance. And by the time you realize that simplicity, patience, and humility outperform almost everything else, you're already old enough to wish you'd started earlier. That's why I'm talking to you now. Because if I could go back, I wouldn't try to be smarter. I'd try to be wiser, sooner. I'd spend less time trying to look right and more time trying not to be wrong. I'd read fewer opinions and more history. I'd trade cleverness for discipline. I lived 99 years to learn this. The game of life doesn't reward speed. It rewards survival. Outlast your mistakes, and you'll outlive most of your competition. That's what this final lesson is about. What I wish I had truly understood when I was your age. The first thing I learned too late is that patience beats brilliance. Everyone wants to act. Nobody wants to wait. And yet almost everything that works in life rewards those who can sit still while everyone else panics. I've seen it in investing, in business, in relationships. The people who rush lose. The people who wait win. You don't need constant motion. You need endurance. I used to believe progress came from doing more. Now I know it comes from doing less, but doing it longer and better. Patience compounds, not just money, wisdom, reputation, trust, all of it. But the world doesn't teach patience. It rewards urgency. It sells you faster, easier, bigger. And people buy it, decade after decade, generation after generation. Here's the truth. If you can simply wait when others can't, you'll eventually own half the world. The second thing I learned too late: envy is the enemy of reason. I wasted years comparing myself to people who were richer, louder, or luckier. Envy doesn't motivate. It poisons. It turns intelligence into resentment and focus into noise. Nothing good ever comes from it. I've never met a happy person who was envious, And I've never met an envious person who was wise. If you want peace of mind, kill envy early. Admire quietly, but don't compare. The third lesson: avoid people who make you stupid. I mean that literally. Your environment rewires your brain faster than you think. Sit with idiots long enough and you'll start to sound like them. I've seen brilliant people lose decades in the wrong company, not because they lacked intelligence, but because they absorbed the behavior of fools. Wisdom is contagious. So is stupidity. Choose your exposure carefully. The fourth thing I wish I'd learned earlier: character compounds faster than money. Integrity is slow at first. It costs you. You lose deals, friends, opportunities. But then it pays quietly, over time, in ways you can't predict. Every good decision you make adds invisible interest to your reputation. And every small lie, shortcut, or betrayal withdraws from that balance. I've seen people make fortunes overnight and lose them just as quickly, because their character couldn't support their wealth. That's the trap. You can borrow brilliance, you can fake confidence, but you can't counterfeit character for long. Live long enough, and the bill always comes due. The fifth lesson: discipline outperforms intelligence. You don't need to be extraordinary, you just need to be consistent. I've met thousands of brilliant people who couldn't sit still long enough to let their ideas work. The world isn't short on smart people, it's short on steady ones. Discipline is boring, it's unsexy, but boredom builds empires. If you can focus on one thing for 20 years while everyone else gets distracted every 6 months, you'll look like a genius eventually. These are the things I didn't understand when I was your age. I chased cleverness and missed wisdom. I chased opportunity and missed endurance. I thought success was a sprint. It's not. It's a survival test. And most people fail not because they can't win, but because they can't wait to. The older I got, the more I realized that success has very little to do with brilliance, and almost everything to do with avoiding stupidity. You don't have to be extraordinary to win. You just have to be consistently reasonable while others self-destruct. Half of wisdom is knowing when not to act. I used to think great decisions came from genius, perfect timing, deep analysis, the grand insight. Number. Great decisions come from not making stupid ones. You want to know my secret? I just avoided the obvious disasters. I stayed away from debt. I stayed away from envy. I stayed away from people who confused confidence with competence. You don't need to be right all the time. You just need to be wrong less often than everyone else. That's how you survive long enough for compounding of wealth, knowledge, and character to do its quiet work. Another thing I learned far too late: humility isn't weakness, it's realism. Life punishes arrogance with precision. The moment you think you're immune to stupidity, you've already made your next mistake. When I was younger, I wanted to be certain. Now, I prefer to be curious. Certainty closes the mind. Curiosity keeps it open. The best thinkers I've known, including Warren, never spoke as if they had the final answer. They spoke as if they were always updating the model. That's what humility really is: the ability to keep learning after you've been proven right. The problem is, most people confuse confidence with conviction. They believe strongly in things they barely understand. They take pride in opinions instead of inaccuracy checks. I have watched countless bright people destroy their judgment because they couldn't admit, "I don't know." Three of the most powerful words in the English language are, "I don't know." They protect you from arrogance and force you to learn. The moment you say them, you start thinking clearly. Which brings me to the next truth. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Complexity hides fragility. Simplicity reveals truth. I spent half my life trying to make things sound clever. Then I realized the smartest people I knew explained everything in plain English. The human mind craves complexity because it flatters the ego. But the world rewards clarity because it produces results. Every time I simplified a decision, I got closer to reality. Every time I added complexity, I got lost in it. If you want to make better choices, start asking simpler questions. Not what's the upside. Ask what can go wrong, not how can I win. Ask how do I avoid losing, not how can I impress them. Ask why am I trying to. Simplicity cuts through the noise and exposes what matters. And once you know what matters, the rest is just distraction. The last thing I'll tell you in this part is this. Wisdom isn't about adding more. It's about subtracting the unnecessary. I used to collect ideas like trophies. Now I throw most of them away. Every truly wise person I've met had one thing in common. They carried light luggage. They thought deeply, but they traveled mentally lean. The less clutter you carry, mental, emotional, financial, the better your judgment becomes. In the end, life's not about doing more. It's about doing less and getting it right. One of the cruelest jokes in life is that success often destroys the very behavior that created it. When you're struggling, you're careful. You watch every move, you question every assumption. You're humble because the world keeps humbling you. Then you start winning. And slowly, without noticing, you stop doing the things that made you win in the first place. I've watched this happen for decades, to individuals, to companies, to entire civilizations. The moment people start believing they deserve their success, they begin building the structure of their downfall. Success has a strange effect on the mind. It whispers that you're special, that the rules no longer apply to you. It tells you that risk is for other people, that discipline is optional, that you're too smart to fail. And that's when the clock starts ticking. I've seen billionaires go broke, CEOs get complacent, politicians collapse, not because the world changed, but because they did. They stopped checking for stupidity. They stopped doubting themselves. When you're poor, you fear mistakes. When you're rich, you forget them. Comfort is far more dangerous than adversity. Failure wakes you up. Comfort puts you to sleep. You think success gives you freedom. It doesn't. It gives you options, and those options test your discipline. I learned the hard way that freedom without restraint is a recipe for self-destruction. You start making exceptions, little ones at first. You skip the checklist once. You stop reading as much. You start believing your own press. And by the time you realize you've drifted off course, you're already far from shore. I remember when Berkshire Hathaway became enormous. People started treating Warren and me like prophets. That's dangerous. The moment people start worshiping you, you risk believing you're worth worshiping. I kept reminding myself, we're not gods. We're two old men who avoided stupidity longer than others. Every time success made me comfortable, I forced myself back into discomfort, reading, thinking, studying things I didn't understand, admitting ignorance again. You see, success doesn't teach you much. Failure does. But once you succeed, people stop giving you honest feedback. They nod, agree, and protect your ego because it's profitable to do so. That's why I value critics more than cheerleaders. A critic tells you where you're blind. A fan tells you you're fine. You should pray for at least one person in your life who will call you an idiot when you deserve it. Most people lose that voice once they get successful. I've lived long enough to know that success is not a destination. It's a test. It tests whether you can stay rational when the world tells you you're a genius. It tests whether you can keep your ego small when your balance sheet gets big. The paradox of success is this: the more you have, the easier it becomes to lose yourself. I never trusted comfort. Comfort dulls the mind, weakens judgment, and sedates ambition. It tells you that what you've done is enough, and that's the first step toward decline. I fear comfort more than I fear failure, because failure hurts your pride, but comfort kills your discipline. So, when life starts treating you well, stay alert. Question your habits, your assumptions, your compliments. Success is a visitor. Be polite to it, learn from it, but never marry it. The moment you start believing you've mastered the game changes. That's the paradox of success. It looks like the reward, but it's really the next exam. And almost everyone fails it, quietly, slowly, believing they're still winning. I've seen this movie too many times. The ending is always the same. The hero stops questioning himself, and the villain turns out to be the man in the mirror. If you remember only one thing from this, remember this: success doesn't make you immune to stupidity. It makes you blind to it. And blindness at any level of wealth is fatal. One of the hardest lessons life taught me is this: control is mostly an illusion. When you're young, you think you can plan your way through life, as if logic and spreadsheets could bend reality to your will. You think if you're smart enough, prepared enough, careful enough, everything will unfold exactly as you designed. It won't. Reality doesn't read your plans. The world is messy, random, and indifferent to your expectations. You can make the right move and still lose. You can make the wrong one and still win. I learned this sitting in boardrooms where billions were at stake, watching people cling to the illusion that they could predict the future. They called it strategy. I called it wishful thinking in a PowerPoint presentation. You can't outsmart randomness, but you can respect it. Most of what happens in life isn't under your control, but how you respond to it always is. That's where real power hides, not in prediction, but in preparation. I stopped trying to control outcomes a long time ago. Now I focus on controlling exposure. I can't predict which company will succeed, but I can make sure I don't bet the farm on one. I can't predict when a market will crash, but I can keep enough cash and calm to take advantage when it does. People waste years chasing certainty. They build models, algorithms, and narratives to make chaos look orderly. But life is not a laboratory experiment. You can't remove uncertainty. You can only build systems that survive it. When I was younger, I thought intelligence was about accuracy. Now I know it's about adaptability. The intelligent person doesn't try to be right. He tries to stay alive long enough to adjust when he's wrong. I call this rational humility. It's not weakness, it's self-defense. The people who blow up in business, in investing, in life, are usually the ones who mistake control for competence. They think being confident makes them safe. It doesn't. It just makes the fall more painful. The truth is, the future doesn't care about your confidence. It punishes arrogance, not ignorance. I've sat through crises where the most sophisticated models failed. Beautiful math, wrong assumptions. What saved us wasn't intelligence. It was margin of safety, redundancy, and patience. The world will always surprise you. The question is whether the surprise kills you or teaches you. That's why I keep what looks like paranoia, but it's really discipline. I expect the unexpected. I assume my forecasts are wrong. I leave room for error in everything. That's how you survive the chaos everyone else calls bad luck. The illusion of control is seductive because it flatters the ego. It tells you you're the author of your destiny, the master of outcomes. But in reality, you're just one participant in a complex, unpredictable system. You can't dictate results. You can only position yourself to handle whatever result appears. Control what's controllable, your behavior, your discipline, your temperament. Everything else, markets, people, politics, pandemics, is just weather. You can't stop the storm, but you can build a stronger roof. I've seen entire fortunes evaporate because their owners believed they could control the wind. The wise don't curse the weather, they prepare for it. The illusion of control is the reason people overestimate their foresight and underestimate their fragility. You're not supposed to eliminate uncertainty. You're supposed to survive it. And survival, in the long run, looks a lot like genius. Ignorance is more expensive than intelligence, but you only realize that after you've paid the bill. I've watched bright people lose fortunes, relationships, and peace of mind simply because they never learned how to think properly. Not how to memorize, not how to sound smart, but how to actually reason. Most people don't think. They just rearrange their prejudices and call it thought. The human brain is lazy. It craves shortcuts, stories, and certainty. That's why ignorance is so profitable, because it feels good. It's easier to believe a comforting lie than to confront a complicated truth. It's easier to follow the crowd than to ask, wait, does this make sense? I made a small fortune just by refusing to join the stampedes that trampled everyone else. Every few years, some new mania comes along. Tulips, tech stocks, crypto, AI, whatever the trend of the decade happens to be. The script never changes. People chase what they don't understand with money they don't have to impress people they don't like. And when it collapses, they call it bad luck. It's not bad luck. It's ignorance charging interest. I've said this before. If you think education is expensive, try ignorance. Ignorance doesn't just cost you money. It costs you time, which is infinitely more valuable. You can recover from losing $1. You can't recover from wasting a decade. When you don't know what you're doing, you end up busy instead of effective. You confuse motion for progress. You mistake effort for strategy. The world doesn't reward how hard you work. It rewards how smart you work. And intelligence, in my experience, has less to do with IQ and more to do with humility, the ability to admit what you don't know and then fix it. I was a poor young lawyer once, sitting in a small office, reading everything I could find: physics, biology, psychology, engineering. Not because I wanted to be an expert in all of them, but because I didn't want to be ignorant of how the world actually worked. That curiosity compounded. It became my edge. The world is full of people who stopped learning the day they graduated. They coast on old ideas, old habits, old tools. Then they wake up one day and wonder why life passed them by. Ignorance isn't just about not knowing, it's about refusing to learn. The moment you think you figured it all out, ignorance moves in and takes over. The most dangerous people I've ever met weren't the uneducated, they were the overconfident. They mistook experience for wisdom, repetition for mastery, and loudness for truth. I've seen ignorance wear a suit, speak in jargon, and run billion-dollar companies. Don't be fooled. Sophistication doesn't cure stupidity. It just disguises it better. Knowledge, on the other hand, is humbling. The more you know, the more you realize how much you don't. That's why I tell people, spend less time consuming information and more time digesting it. The internet has turned everyone into an expert and no one into a thinker. Information is everywhere. Understanding is scarce. Thinking is expensive. It costs time, solitude, and ego. But ignorance charges a higher price. It takes everything. So if you want an advantage in life, become the rare person who actually learns slowly, deeply, painfully. Because while the crowd is busy chasing shortcuts, you'll be quietly compounding wisdom. Ignorance is cheap up front, but it's the most expensive debt you'll ever carry. Pay it early, or spend your life paying for it with regret. If I had to name the single force that ruins more lives than ignorance, it would be emotion. I've watched rational men turn into gamblers, brilliant investors become fools, and level-headed leaders self-destruct, all because they couldn't manage what was happening inside their own heads. You can survive stupidity if you're calm, but once emotion takes over, even intelligence becomes dangerous. The mind under stress doesn't think, it reacts. And reaction is the enemy of reason. When people panic, they don't see reality. They see their fears projected onto it. When they get greedy, they don't calculate. They hallucinate. When they're angry, they don't listen. They just want to win. Emotion is a terrible master because it always feels justified. Anger feels righteous. Fear feels prudent. Greed feels deserved. I've sat in rooms where billions were lost because someone felt confident. Confidence isn't a strategy. It's usually a symptom of blindness. The most dangerous words in business and in life are, "I feel good about this." I don't trust feelings. I trust evidence. The market doesn't care how you feel. The world doesn't reward enthusiasm. It rewards accuracy. I built my career on boredom, doing the same rational thing again and again while everyone else got emotional. People think boredom is weakness. It's not. Boredom is stability. It's the silence that allows rationality to breathe. I'd rather be bored and rich than excited and broke. But you have to train that mindset. The natural state of the human brain is emotional chaos. We evolved to react, to fight, to flee, to panic. That instinct helped our ancestors survive. Today, it ruins investors, marriages, and governments. The modern world doesn't reward emotional reflexes, it punishes them. I remember times when the market crashed and people begged me to sell everything. They were terrified. They wanted action. I told them, sometimes the smartest move is no move at all. You can't control emotion, but you can delay reaction. And in that pause, that tiny gap between impulse and action, lies the difference between fortune and disaster. I've seen men lose everything because they couldn't wait 5 minutes to calm down. The cure for emotional stupidity is simple but not easy. Build habits that protect you from yourself. Use checklists, follow rules, automate discipline. When you're calm, you design systems. When you're emotional, you obey them. That's how you survive your own brain. Emotion isn't your enemy. It's just a bad driver. You can't kick it out of the car, but you can keep it from touching the wheel. I don't want to be fearless. Fear is useful. I want to be unmoved. When fear comes, I observe it. When greed whispers, I ignore it. I let both emotions pass like weather. Interesting, but irrelevant to navigation. Rationality isn't the absence of emotion. It's the control of it. And control doesn't come from willpower. It comes from awareness. You can't fix what you don't notice. The moment you can see your emotion rising, you've already gained distance from it. That's where wisdom starts, in that half second between the feeling and the reaction. I tell young people this: you can't stop emotions from showing up, but you can decide whether they get to speak. And if you want to live a calm, rational life, learn to keep emotion on mute. Because once emotion starts talking, reason leaves the room, and it rarely comes back in time to save you. Thinking clearly is the hardest thing in the world. That's not an opinion. That's an observation gathered over 99 years of watching people confuse noise with thought. Everyone says they're thinking. What they're really doing is reacting, defending, or rationalizing. Real thinking is different. It's slow, it's quiet, it's brutally honest. I learned early that the human brain is a self-justifying machine. It doesn't want truth, it wants comfort. It edits reality until it fits the story you already believe. So if you want to think well, you have to declare war on your own mind. I don't trust my first thoughts. They're usually emotional, biased, or lazy. My second thoughts, the ones that come after I've calmed down, those are the ones worth listening to. Thinking is not about speed, it's about accuracy. The world worships speed, instant answers, hot takes, quick opinions. I don't. I like slow answers, the ones that survive scrutiny. When you think slowly, you give reason a fighting chance to catch up to emotion. I spend more time thinking than doing. Most people do the opposite. They act fast to look decisive, then spend years fixing the mess their haste created. Thinking is preventive medicine for stupidity, but it's hard work. It requires solitude, patience, and the courage to be wrong in public. I used to spend entire afternoons just sitting quietly. No meetings, no noise, no distractions. Asking one simple question: what don't I understand yet? That question built my fortune. People think you need complexity to make money. Number. You need clarity. The more clearly you think, the fewer mistakes you make. The fewer mistakes you make, the longer you stay in the game. The longer you stay in the game, the richer and wiser you get. That's compounding, not just of capital, but of judgment. Every clear thought you produce becomes a tool you can use for the rest of your life. Every false belief you hold becomes a trap that costs you more time and more peace. Thinking well means constantly checking your beliefs for cracks. You don't protect your opinions. You stress test them. I love being proven wrong. It means I'm one step closer to being right. That's why I surround myself with people who challenge me, not flatter me. I don't want agreement. I want accuracy. Agreement is pleasant. Accuracy is profitable. If you're serious about thinking clearly, you need to fall in love with disconfirmation. Learn to celebrate the moment you realize you've been an idiot, because that's how progress begins. I once told an audience, "You are not entitled to your opinion. You are entitled to your informed opinion." Most people never earn that entitlement. They skim, they assume, they parrot, and then they call it insight. But insight only comes after the hard part, after you've wrestled with contradiction, confusion, and complexity until you come out on the other side with something simple and true. That's what real thinking feels like. It's not comfortable, but it's clean. When you finally see something as it really is, not as you wish it were, there's a strange peace that follows. I live for that peace. Thinking is a form of discipline. You have to train your mind to pause before reacting, to question before judging, to observe before concluding. You do that long enough, and one day you realize you're no longer a victim of circumstance. You've become a student of it, and that's when life starts making sense. I don't owe my success to talent or luck. I owe it to the habit of thinking longer, deeper, and slower than most people can tolerate. That's the discipline of thinking. The world will always reward those who can remain rational, while everyone else is too busy talking to notice the truth. I lived 99 years to learn this. Life doesn't reward brilliance. It rewards discipline. Most people waste decades chasing shortcuts, noise, and excitement. I wasted some too. Then I learned that survival beats speed and patience beats talent. Everything compounds. Your habits, your judgment, your character. The only question is, in which direction? Stop trying to look smart. Try to be consistent. Avoid stupidity, envy, and arrogance. They ruin more lives than bad luck ever did. Read. Think slowly. Stay calm when others lose control. If you can do that long enough, the world will hand you more than you ever imagined. I don't have secrets, only lessons paid for in decades. Learn them now, and you'll save a lifetime. That's it. That's the game. Stay rational. Outlast your mistakes. The rest takes care of itself.